welcome to Asking Autistics. I'm your host, Lindsey, Brains and Spoons.
And I'm the snack monster, Ribera Bun Bun.
And today we are going to talk about terminology, especially when it comes to the autistic community. There's a lot of terms and phrases and words that you're going to hear thrown around online, in videos, and by autistic folks ourselves. And you may not know what they mean, or maybe have a very skewed idea of what they mean, because depending on the source, they might not be using, the words or terms correctly.
On top of that, language is always evolving. Like the same words that we use today aren't going to be the same words that we use in 5 minutes or tomorrow or like 20 years ago. Words are always changing and words are evolving. So we're going to show you what's like the here and now versions of what we're talking about.
Exactly. These are current terms that we in the community are using. And like Riki said, they are not the same terms that were used 10, 15, even 5, even, 2 years ago sometimes. And so with the internet, with things like TikTok and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and all of these wonderful places that we are connecting, that means the sharing of information becomes much more rapid. And so the evolution of terminology just goes so much faster than it did in the past.
People are coming up with new quirky colloquialisms to describe the autism experience, like mild, spicy sriracha autism.
And again, with anything, sometimes there are words that people use to describe themselves or that they feel are fun or appropriate. And then another portion of the community will come in and say, hey, this is hurtful for us. This makes me feel bad. And so again, language is evolving and we need to recognize that and respect it. But for today, here are the terms that we're going to go over and hopefully give you a little more information to add to your lexicon. And so on our list, the first term that you're going to hear a lot of people use, we use it all the time, is neurodivergent. And neurodivergent just means a person whose brain functioning and behavioral traits differ from the mathematical norm or majority.
The neurodivergent umbrella includes so many different disorders. I think a lot of the time on TikTok, the word neurodivergent really gets flattened to just mean autism or ADHD. But what people don't realize is that neurodivergent, which is a term coined by Kasayana Asumas, I believe is her name. She was a neurodivergent activist within the autism acceptance movement, the earliest autism acceptance movement. And she coined the term to describe not just autistic people or people with ADHD, but people with dyspraxia, people with bipolar. That's a big one that a lot of people forget, is that mental illness is included in neurodivergent. It's not just people who are born neurodivergent. There are certain neurodivergencies you can acquire over time. PTSD completely rewires the way your brain works.
And there's people with traumatic brain injuries that are also included in the neurodivergent community because they have a different brain chemistry, different brain patterns now. And so I actually have friends who benefit a lot from the autism and ADHD communities, but they themselves are not technically autistic or ADHD. They have brain injuries that have rewired things to the point that it's so similar. Say things like, different medications won't work for them. But again, they are experiencing brain patterns and brain chemistry that is different from the norm, the neuromajority of people.
Yeah, like another example kind of similar would be people with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. A lot of symptoms of that one also mimic or are very close to autism symptoms. However, somebody with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is not someone who was originally going to be born that way. Unlike an autistic person, autism develops in the womb.
Right. Autism is an inherited genetic condition. So usually it's your parents. It might be grandparents, things like that. But it runs in families. Same with ADHD. But you're right. Something like fetal alcohol spectrum is something that is acquired in the womb, but it's not hereditary in that sense.
No, it's not.
And so, yeah, so these are things that when we say neurodivergent, people may not realize, because so often in online communities, the term neurodivergent is used in conjunction with or as a replacement for autism or ADHD. And so that's something to really keep in mind, is that when we say neurodivergent community, it means a whole lot of people, not just autistic or ADHD folks. And a similar term that people often get confused is neurodiversity. And that is the variation and differences in neurological structure and function that exists among human beings. And as a term, it refers to the idea that differences in brain development and behavior are normal and not a result of mental disorders. There are quite a few people in the neurodiversity movement who don't like the term disorder. It makes them feel bad. However, if you are seeking medical assistance, if you are seeking accommodations in any official capacity, the term disorder is a medical term and it is neutral. It is a neutral term. And so it is still very useful in the community. And so again, people can decide how they would like to refer to themselves, but the term disorder is still used in the community, and it's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's neutral.
It's important that we really don't moralize terms like that. It's, again, like you said, it's not a bad thing. It's also not a good thing. It is neutral. Moralizing these terms can lead to a very slippery slope that usually winds up with a loss of resources from the people experiencing these forms of neurodivergence. Like, I know a lot of people in the bipolar community, which I am a bipolar person myself, are really averse to the term bipolar disorder. And personally, I don't relate to that. Anyone is free, to not identify with the term. I'm not here to pass judgment on you. Your life is your life, and you have the right to identify the way you want to identify. I personally identify with bipolar being a disorder because it heavily disorders my life. And that term, being classified as a disorder, is what not only allows me to seek the medical treatment that I need, which reminds me, got to take my medication. I forgot. Hey, if you're listening, take your medication, because we all forget. But it not only allows me to get the resources that I need to make sure that I'm functioning, it also protects me. When these things are classified as disorders like that, it offers a certain level of protection from discrimination and a right to accommodations so that you can have the same opportunities that people who don't have these disorders have.
Exactly. Going back to the term neurodiversity is everybody. Neurodiversity is people who are not neurodivergent too. The typical brain folks are also a part of neurodiversity. It just means that everybody's brain is different. So when we say neurodiversity, that's what we mean. And it includes everybody. When we say neurodivergent or neurodivergence, that's when we are talking about folks with different brain chemistry, meaning autistic, ADHD, bipolar, etc.
One was coined by Katsiana Asamas, which was neurodivergent, as I mentioned. Neurodiversity was coined by Judy Singer back in the early 2000s, and it was specifically to normalize the idea of being disabled or mentally ill. It was to say, it wasn't to eliminate these from being disorders, even though some people kind of use it as that. That's never what it was intended to be. It was actually just intended to be more like the holistic model of disability, where it's like, yes, I am disabled, and that is normal.
Right. It was just an inclusive way to say, hey, there's folks with disability out here in the world too, include us. And the next term we're going to talk about is ASD, which stands for Autism Spectrum Disorder. ASD is a complex developmental condition that involves persistent challenges in social interaction, speech, and nonverbal communication, and restricted repetitive behaviors. And that is a very general definition of autism. If you want to find out what the different traits and diagnostic criteria for autism are, you can look in the DSM-5 TR, which is the manual used in North America and globally to diagnose different medical and mental conditions. And so
you could just listen to our podcast.
Yes. You can also find out a lot of good information about autism online. However, there's also some not great information online. So just be careful.
Be careful. We're again, yeah.
Right. Which is why I would say go back to the books. Okay. Now, this is a phrase you're going to hear in our community, and it comes with a lot of baggage and debate. PDA, which stands for pathological demand avoidance or persistent drive for autonomy. Okay. And people with PDA display avoidance of people's demands and expectations. I will say this, that in the US and just North America in general, PDA is not recognized as its own diagnosis or its own separate condition, say under an autism umbrella.
Very much in the research phase.
Yes, it's still very much in the research phase. However, there are PDA advocates and organizations in Europe, in the UK, and in Australia and New Zealand. So this is something where we are very much in the research phase and trying to figure out the ins and outs of PDA, basically demand avoidance.
It's a well-documented thing. I mean, I can't tell you how many shows I've put off because people have been telling me that I'm going to enjoy it. Stop telling me I'm going to enjoy the Book of Boba Fett, okay? Stop telling me that I'll never watch it because you keep telling me to watch it. I mean, that's just a very trivial example.
Right. But there are plenty of, especially if you have the autism and ADHD combo, there are well-documented instances of folks with that particular diagnosis really struggling with demands from others and even ourselves. Like if we feel like we have to do something, then our brain will say, well, no, I won't. I won't do that now.
I'm not going to do it.
Right. And this is things we want to do. Okay. This could be something like eating. Okay. Like it can be things like because someone told you it's time to eat now, your brain will say, no, it's not. And again, these are traits and behaviors that we do not have a lot of control over. And so it's incredibly frustrating. So that's why there's a lot of research and a lot of like advocacy work going on right now trying to deal with PDA, with demand avoidance in general. So you will hear that term. You will hear PDA a lot on the internet, but it is very, I don't know if divisive is the right word, but it's highly debated.
It's highly debated, but I think it's very important to remember that even if we're not sure at this present moment what PDA is, in my opinion, the responsible way to talk about it is to be very transparent about where we are with understanding PDA. That doesn't mean, just because it's still in the theory phase, that doesn't mean that you don't experience those symptoms. And that doesn't mean that talking about the way you engage with your life and adjusting to that, that doesn't mean that that's not helpful. Some of these PDA content creators can actually offer really beneficial advice. It's just really important that they acknowledge that we're in the baby steps of even understanding what PDA is.
Again, using these terms and looking into, these communities and things like that is great. It's perfectly fine. Just know that with a lot of things, like we said, things are evolving. Things are still being researched. And so that's where we are with PDA. Scripting. That is something that I do all the time. The practice of repeating set phrases and words from a pre-planned conversation to help alleviate the anxiety of an unfamiliar situation. That is actually something that both of us have experienced and a lot of other autistic friends of ours have talked about, is the amount of scripted play that they did as kids. And so adults watching us would just be like, oh, okay, like they play, they have friends, like they can't be autistic. But realizing later on when we explained it that we were going off of these scripts, we had practiced what we were going to say, or we will always say or do the exact same things no matter what the scenario was. And that is what was creating a lot of the difficulties. And again, it's a way to alleviate anxiety.
It is.
It can be incredibly helpful. I have scripts I have to use when I go to the store.
It's a way to alleviate anxiety until you realize that you scripted the wrong thing and you sit there and it's awkward and you're like, now my anxiety is higher.
You said, yes, they can create problems. But I know for me, I script conversations because of the pressure at the cash registers when they try to get you to get a store card, sign up for a credit card. I will freeze and fawn if I don't have a script. And it has been a real problem for me because I don't want to do these things, but I struggle with those like aggressive sales tactics and like that peer pressure. And so having a script in place that I go through and say to them is like my only defense. And so scripting is a really big part of the autistic experience. And other people could do it. I mean, again, when we talk about these things, anybody can do anything for any reason.
Like, if you really think about it, the people who practiced saying here in high school before it came up for them to be called for roll call, that in and of itself is a form of scripting. You're pre-planning the way that you're going to engage with people. If you've ever planned out those conversations in the shower, that like that
first date, you think of topics you're going to talk about.
You're scripting, and that's completely normal. It's just that autistic people happen to do it on a larger scale, and we happen to rely on it more. For me as a child, most of my interactions were based off of like TV and film. Like I didn't actually know what I was saying. And sure, there was the occasional moment where, you know, you make everything awkward because you're pretending to be Ash Williams in Evil Dead 2, which drastically inappropriate for children, might I add. But then there was the moments where it was helpful.
See, I mean, that's the thing is when you're autistic, we script so much, but it also can be helpful, like you said, like depending on the character or the script that I have planned out, it could go well. Okay, I could have pulled out something from 10 Things I Hate About You, and I look like a smart, tough girl, or I tried something from a John Hughes movie, and it was awful. It does not go well. So again, scripting is something that autistic people really rely on. Our next one is in that, I feel like we've almost touched on it a little bit with the scripting, but echolalia is the repeating of sounds, words, or phrases, the repetition of words, phrases, intonation, or sounds of the speech of others, sometimes taken from movies and television.
So the key difference between echolalia and scripting, even though they can coincide a lot, is that echolalia is not used as a form of interaction. It's used as a form of vocal stimming. And so it's not used, we're not repeating the same phrase over and over again in order to like try and communicate with other people. We're oftentimes just repeating it because it's like running around in our heads over and over and over again, and you have to say it, and you're like saying it out loud as a form of like calming yourself. Like sometimes, like I'm pretty sure in college, I weirded out my classmates because sometimes when I would get really overwhelmed, I would just sit there in the corner and over again, I would go, ping pong, 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 ping pong. And they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, ping pong, ping pong, ping pong. And they're like, they must have thought that I was just so out of, but what I was doing was I was overstimulated and I was just saying ping pong over and over again because it was what was relaxing me. It was the noise and it was the vocal intonations of that phrase that was relaxing me.
We'll do this. And I realize now, shout out to anyone who I've ever been roommates with. I'm so sorry because those are the folks who have seen behind the mask. They are like, wow, she's really weird and hard to be around. So that's what's been interesting is that telling people that I am autistic, having an adult diagnosis, it's interesting because folks on the internet will be like, well, you don't look autistic. But every roommate and person I've dated has been like, that explains so much.
Every time. Like, I've never been fake claimed in person. Every time I tell people that I'm autistic, they're like, oh my God, I get it. That's why you're weird.
Part of that for me, echolalia can also be songs. It can be music. And
Yeah.
so I would play, I still do this. I play the same song over and over and over, or just one line of a song over. And when I say over and over, I'm not like, oh, okay, like, ha ha ha, she played it 3 times in a row. No, I'm talking 100 times a day, loudly, and I'm sharing a room with other people, and having no concept that this was bad, annoying, inappropriate. It was just like the way I'm stimming, I'm self-regulating just over and over and over again. And I am so shocked that like people did not physically harm me from doing some of these things. There is one that was pointed out to me that I didn't realize I did until this is in college. Again, there's lots of these things that are very prevalent and should be more obvious in childhood, but especially in women, especially in those of us who are high masking, this continues. Well, it continues into adulthood. It can look differently, but also those of us who are late diagnosed, we tend to look back on things and go, oh, until someone pointed it out, I didn't know that I was doing this. And so I used to make little music sounds to myself when I walked from the time I can remember as a child, okay, into college. And I would walk around going, bow, chicka bow, 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 chicka bow, 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 bow.
You have like your own theme song. You're like, you're like Jessica Day.
Right. I saw a clip of Ally McBeal at some point as a kid. I wasn't like,
not the Ally McBeal.
And was like, oh, finally, someone else who has all these things in their head, someone else who's like got a lot going on. And I could relate to that. Well, it was pointed out to me in college that my theme music for walking around sounded like an adult film score. Wow.
Yeah. Okay. If it helps, I have a similar instance. I have a similar story. I was 4 and my family always had family movie night, and my parents never picked an age-appropriate movie for family movie night. My parents were those parents that were like, we don't care that we have kids. We're going to watch what we want to watch. And the kids are either going to be traumatized or they're going to be fine. We watched the movie Liar Liar, and
Jim Carrey, yeah.
Jim Carrey, so funny. Still a classic movie. The movie still holds up. I just watched it recently. It's still funny to this day. But there is a scene where his secretary, like, he's really depressed, and his secretary is like, oh, I have one of your clients on the phone. He robbed a payphone. What do you want me to tell him? And Jim Carrey just grabs the mic, the phone, and like 3 feet away holding it goes, stop breaking the lie. Except he didn't censor his.
Right.
And that, my autism brain picked that up. And I had this little telephone that on wheels that I would drag around everywhere. It was my favorite toy. And I would pick it up and shout the same thing while my mom has me at church, at Sunday school. And I got kicked out of Sunday school for continuously saying that over and over again.
Because I would go to friends' houses and they were allowed to watch these R-rated movies and things like that. And so, yeah, I remember like repeating lines over and over again that got laughs, right?
Yeah, it's always the funny ones.
Popular with adults or with other people. And so then my little first grade self goes back to school and I'm just repeating something from Kid and Play or something over and over again. Again, because echolalia, it's not just like trying it once. You just will say things
you do
to
it
yourself
over and over and over again.
Over and over again. And I remember getting in so much trouble, and they were like,
you can always tell when an autistic kid watches something that they weren't supposed to.
Right. Well, but that's the thing. No one tells us that you see people enjoying it, and it becomes like this quote that adults or older kids say. And so you don't have the reference, the frame of mind, the understanding that is not okay to repeat in all situations or at your age, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's a frustrating thing for us because, again, a lot of times with echolalia, like it feels like we just absorb it. Like it becomes something that we've heard once and now we say it. Like, I mean,
And
and
now we
I've
say
had,
it and we expect it to have the same reaction that it does in the movies.
right. And like I had a student that memorized the phone numbers off of commercials. And so they'd just be like 588
2, 300
300.
and
Right. Like all the time. Like, right. Which was
these
like
kids
when
remember.
we're on a field trip and we're like camping in the middle of the woods, like it's really hard to go to sleep when, you know, you're hearing a commercial phone number over and over and over again. But again,
Now that's stuck in my head. Dang it.
really, echolalia is very common in the autistic community. Okay. Our next term is special interest, which is a highly focused and intense interest common in autistic people, more passionate than hobbies, often seen as obsessions to allistics.
Don't mind me just casually looking at my shark wall.
That's right. For those of you listening, if you want to see Riki's shark wall, you can see it on YouTube. It's gorgeous.
It's literally like a tapestry of sharks and like a neon shark sign behind me. Like, I always explain special interest like I live my life inside of a donut, because like for people who don't, it's based off of like a Tumblr post where somebody's like, oh, you know, I casually, it's like talking about something like I like donuts. And then you find out that the person there not only likes donuts, but that they only eat donuts, that their entire personality is donuts, that their entire house is a donut. And it's like, yeah, that's me with my special interest.
I think it's so hard for me to relate to folks who just are casual about the world and things like that.
Yeah.
I actually had this conversation the other night because I went to a friend's house and they had invited a couple people over, and it was like the first time I've been social in a long time. And I immediately was like, are you autistic? Like, are you ADHD? And this girl was like, yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. And so like we became besties right away. And we just went like boom, 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 boom. We talked immediately. There was no like, so what do you do for a living? It just ends up coming out somehow because we were talking about, you know, birds. Not birds, no. Birds is one of my special interests. So Riki knows this. We actually have some episodes where I info dump all about crazy, wild, cool bird things.
Yeah, go listen to that episode for crow scene investigation.
Yes,
That's the only context I'm giving you.
I did talk about the Victorians. That is another one of my special interests. But this was mostly full nerd stuff. I don't know if you guys, because Riki and I are both big geeks.
Hardcore
like
nerds.
Yes, hardcore nerds. And that is a more generalized special interest for us because it's the fantasy sci-fi love of those things. But you can cycle through like Star Wars or Doctor Who or Star Trek. For me, Riki has some bias because she was raised by a Trekkie.
I have 4 different Star Wars themed waffle makers in my kitchen downstairs. 4 that each make a different Star Wars themed shaped waffle. And
right,
I'm very biased against Star Trek because my autistic parent, their special interest is Star Trek. So I grew up like my shark wall is nothing compared to my dad's Star Trek wall, where there's a literal shrine to Captain Kirk and posters, like multiple posters that are like why Kirk is a better captain than Picard. And like the main one is that Kirk can beat a Vulcan in chess. Like, right. I don't know what any of that means.
It's not always the case, but there is a high prevalence of neurodivergent people in the nerd community, in the geek community, especially I would say like Star Trek.
Oh yeah, especially Star Trek and Star Wars. Like back when I lived in LA,
I feel like has become very mainstream
it's a little
and
bit
popular.
More mainstream, yeah.
I would say, but especially the more like intense sci-fi shows where you're talking about different engineering type of things, et cetera,
or like Doctor Who,
right? Where there's a lot of neurodivergent folks. If you go to conventions, there is a much higher rate of autistic folks in a local comic convention, again, because our interests run deep. When we like something, it's not just casual. Like we want to know everything about it. We want to live in it, be absorbed in it. I mean, it becomes an issue for some of us because we won't stop sometimes. Like we'll...
A firm believer that anybody who has read the Silmarillion, if you're in the Lord of the Rings fan and you have actually gotten through the Silmarillion along with it, take a test. Take a test. That's dedication that most people without special interests just don't have. Take a test.
Yeah, maybe
take an assessment.
A self-assessment there. One of the online assessments. Yeah, so a special interest is not just a hobby.
No, it's not.
All-consuming sometimes. Like we said, to an extent where it can be unhealthy. But usually it is very comforting for us. This is how we learn to engage with the world. This is how we can bond with other people. It makes me so happy to like be in my Victorian world or learning about birds. So yeah, that is why sometimes you'll hear these terms thrown around, by non-autistic people from allistic people. That's what that means.
Yeah.
That's another term. I think it's lower on the list, but allistic
go over it
means non-autistic person. They may have another diagnosis. That doesn't mean that they are neurotypical, meaning non-neurodivergent. They could have ADHD or
they could
be dyslexic.
The thing is, ADHD people have a similar but still different experience. Hyperfixations are a thing for ADHD people. However, a big difference between a hyperfixation and a special interest is oftentimes the amount of time dedicated to it. Because autism special interests can last up to years.
Can be lifelong for many people.
Disneyland has been a lifelong special interest for me.
Especially if you have, again, the ADHD and autism combo platter. If it does. We tend to find things that are like, again, it's a combination. So like I've said for Riki and I, where sci-fi and fantasy is our special interest. But because of the ADHD, we will hyper-focus on different shows, books, realms, games for different periods of time. But it's all within that same category that we go back to over and over and over again. Another term that you're going to hear that I think is really important in the autistic, ADHD, just neurodivergent community in general is executive functioning. And these are the mental skills of being responsible for things such as paying attention, planning, organizing, task initiation, and completion.
Hey, Lindsey, how many times did we try and start this podcast?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so like we've been trying for like 2 years to make this podcast. We even recorded months of episodes only to realize that it didn't like work. Like the recordings didn't work. We've shifted gears. We've had all these different things that happen. So trying to like organize and be consistent with recording and not get distracted and talk about random things. Like those are all very difficult tasks for us. In fact, organizing and detail-oriented task work has been so difficult for both of us that we have hired friends to help us. Like we have to depend on friends, family members, partners to help us complete tasks, to, like we said, initiation, to start things. I rely on things like body doubling to help me begin a task. There's so many things that the average person, a neurotypical person, would be flabbergasted by. That when we talk about executive dysfunctioning, we're not just saying like, I'm so scattered. We're like, oh, I'm just not very organized. No, I'm saying like a task that would take less than 5 minutes, I cannot get myself to do it.
Like even eating. And I think that that's the cannot is what people get caught up on. People think that we're just being lazy, and we're not. It's literally like almost a physical barrier. Not even almost. It really feels like a physical barrier where
you feel paralyzed.
Completely. Like, I don't want to sit here and be doing nothing for the next like 30 minutes, but my brain has decided that eating breakfast is not for me right now. And so I sit there and I'm just doing nothing because my brain will not allow me to actually do something. So all I'm feeling is like this anxiety of get up, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it.
It reminds me a little bit of in that movie, the Quentin Tarantino movie, Kill Bill. And there's that scene where Uma Thurman's looking at her.
Wiggle your big toe.
Right. And she's like, wiggle your big toe. And she just keeps saying it to herself, trying to will herself into doing it. And that feels to me so relevant on a daily basis because I'm just like, just pick up the toothbrush. Just brush your teeth. Just brush your teeth. That's something I struggle with. There's a lot of layers to that. Self-care tasks have multiple reasons why they're difficult, but that is the kind of thing that the average person isn't struggling with. They're like, oh, yeah, I forgot to brush my teeth today, but that's okay. Like, I'll do it tonight. No, like, I go weeks without brushing my teeth. These are all supposedly simple tasks, okay? These are things that we're not talking about. I struggle to organize my wedding. We're talking about, like, I cannot go to the grocery store on my own. I have too many struggles. And burnout, I mean, you've probably heard burnout when different people's jobs or things like that, but very specifically in the autistic community, autistic burnout happens because we have to work so much harder to do these things in the world that, again, seem like simple, easy things to other people, and they are not for us. And at a point, we have gone through so much executive dysfunction. We've gone through so much masking, which, by the way, masking is suppressing behaviors that may be one's natural response or performing behaviors considered neurotypical for the purpose of being accepted by others and fitting in. And we do this a lot. It involves scripting. It involves training your facial features and copying people around you. There's so many layers to masking. But when you do this all the time for your entire life, you're constantly trying to like perform the human behaviors for the other humans that don't come naturally to us. So we're suppressing things. We are performing other things that don't feel natural, making eye contact constantly to show people that you're listening, which is not the case. If I'm having to focus on your face, then like nothing else is happening in my brain, especially those of us who are quote unquote high masking. Riki and I are part of the autistic like subgroup of like, we are overly emotional, over expressive. We learn to do this with theater and by mimicking and watching characters and other people around us. Those are the things that like we've learned over time is like, so now like again as an adult, like we can't really, it's hard to separate. So like I can't really stop, but the overly gregarious, like the manic pixie dream girl thing is an autistic behavior because that's the way we learned how to be human in society. We overdo it, which then gives people all kinds of misconceptions. They're like, oh, she's super into me. Like, she's hitting on me. We're like, no, you mentioned birds, and I got real excited.
I can't tell you how many times I've had the conversation in high school where people have told me that they thought I was like a stalker because I seemed crazy interested in them. Like one dude who wound up becoming a friend of mine, he's a total sweetheart, but he legitimately thought I was a stalker because he thought I was staring at him constantly in class. And what he didn't realize was that was me just like in the moments where I was like, I'm too exhausted to mask. And so I would drop the mask and I would just like zone out. And he just happened to be in my view. And he legit thought I was stalking him for like an entire semester until he got into theater. Oh, it was bonkers. But then he joined our theater program and he spent time around me and he's like, no, you're just always like that.
I think that's the base. So this goes with we talk about autistic people is nonverbal communication and struggling with these kinds of things and cues and social cues. Like that is a huge chunk of it. Like this stuff does not come naturally to us. And What's interesting, though, is that amongst each other sometimes is we communicate differently. We don't use body language to judge what other people. This is what's great. It's like if I tell Riki how I feel, she takes that at face value. Not my intonation, not my, like, what I'm doing with my hands and my face. She's just like, oh, okay, you're not mad.
There are some non-autistic people who can really learn to pick it up. Like one of my friends, her child is autistic, and she can always, she and I were in like a couple of plays together. She could always tell when I was uncomfortable, even if before I could, because she had learned to pick it up with her son. Again, she herself was not autistic, but she learned the way that autistic people tend to communicate. And she would always jump in for me, and she'd be like, you're overstimulated. You need a break. Let's go get you a break. And I was like, wow, that's so nice and thoughtful. And then I would realize that she was right. I was overstimulated. And I'm like, I don't need interoception. I have January.
Okay. Another common word that you will hear in the autistic community is stimming. Stimming is an informal term, short for the clinical term self-stimulatory behaviors, and it refers to repetitive behaviors or motions that a person does, such as spinning, rocking, flapping, biting your nails, twirling your hair. If you are watching us on YouTube, if you're watching us in this podcast online, you will see stimming, even though we try not to do it while we're filming. Like it just happens. You'll see me wiggling a lot, twirling my hair a lot. I'm actually going to use a toy for a little bit to help me keep my hands busy.
It's like when you talk about it, you have to do it more because your brain is actively aware of it.
But stimming is something that we do. It can be a calming mechanism. Sometimes it can be like when other things are stimulating, then we will do something with our own body, because sometimes it feels like the energy has to get out of my body somehow. So anybody can stim. Again, this is another one. Like anybody can do anything for any reason. Particularly autistic people and ADHD people stim a lot. We are constantly wiggling and moving. And so that can be an issue. Say like you're in a work environment and people think that you are not paying attention during meetings because you're constantly moving around. Or in school, a lot of us got in trouble.
Oh my God, yeah. Like the amount of times I got told I can't sit still because I can't. Not always in a healthy way, though, which was what I was going to say about stimming, is that not all stims are actually good to do. Sometimes you want to try and find replacement stims if you can.
Yeah.
One form of stimming that I've never been able to find a replacement for, and honestly, I'm not even sure if it's like actually just a stim or
just trigger warning really quickly for anybody. We are going to be talking about some slightly self-harming behaviors. So
this wasn't even a self-harm behavior. This is
I'm about to give a
gotcha. So one of mine is that I'm constantly like playing with my eyelashes, and like literally like everyone thinks that I'm like pulling them out.
Trichotillomania?
That's what I'm like, is it stimming or is it trichotillomania? But either way, it does fulfill some sort of stimulation. Yeah, it's a stimulation purpose because I like the feeling of my eyelashes being very sharp on my skin, on my eyelids. Weird thing, it's not a self-harm behavior. However, it is a stim that can cause issues. I once went on a cruise with my family. We were on a cruise to Mexico. I pet a donkey and then stimmed after with my eyelashes. I got the worst case of pink eye that I've ever had in my life. And we took a family photo. You can see in the family photo, like I'm like smiling, but my eye is like shut and squinty. But that's something that can happen because it's not a healthy stim. It's not a good
There's a lot of things like that. I had a lot of piercings in college. Again, why nobody noticed? I guess people noticed and they just like, there's that weird girl. And they just like, I don't know what was going on. Right? Like, I don't know. I'm like, for real. I used to squeeze my piercings, like my belly button piercing, until I could get pus or things to come out of my body. Okay, so like it's just, I mean, it's kind of like squeezing zits or
Like popping
picking at
pimples
things,
and things like that.
popping
Yeah.
pimples, all that kind of stuff. Okay, those can also be stims for people. Like I would do it
Mm-hmm.
all the time. Okay, so like I had this little hole
Yeah.
on my body for a piercing, and I ended up having to take them out later on, not because like, oh, they weren't professional. It was because I was hurting myself by constantly touching them all the
Yeah.
time.
And the thing is a lot of the times, not all the time, but a lot of the times, stimming can go hand in hand with sensory seeking behavior, meaning that an autistic person is feeling understimulated by their sensory inputs. So they seek outside solutions for that, and for a lot of people, it involves like touch and things like that, and things that you can put your hand on. One thing that I don't think we talk about enough is the ways in which eating can often be a stim and a sensory seeking behavior. Like earlier, I was munching on some cinnamon pretzel sticks here on the podcast. I wasn't munching on those because I was hungry. I was munching on those for the sensory seeking behavior of like getting the cinnamon and sugar off of them. It's also the same way I eat Doritos. I have to lick the cheese off, not because I think the cheese is gross, but it's the sensory seeking behavior of that cheese dust.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of things like where I will do, and we do a lot of this, like not even maybe noticing it. Sometimes it's purposeful. Like she said, like we will go find something that we need. Like we will put something heavy on top of ourselves because we need to feel
weighted blanket
crushed. But there's a lot of things that are stims like that I do where I don't notice that I've been doing it because it is just so part of like again, it's a stim. It's just part of the movements of my body that I constantly do until I am bleeding. And that happens a lot. In some of my videos, older ones, I haven't done it recently. I need to go do this again. I have really pretty nails because I got my nails professionally done. I have fake nails on, and that's not because like I was trying to be like fancy and keep it classy. It is because I will pick and scratch and bite myself until I'm hurt, and then my fingers get infected and it gets really bad and I can't stop myself. So paying for the fake nails is like the only answer. And I'm at that point again. It's getting bad.
That's the way I am with like the eyelash playing. I will wear mascara to stop myself from doing it because when I wear
the goopy.
Yeah, I don't like the goopy. It stops that sensory experience. Like wearing glasses does not help. I just like push my glasses up and I just play, but like mascara stops me from doing it, which is often why I wear makeup.
Yeah, me wearing glasses changed how much I fidgeted, how much I did eye stuff. So that was helpful. But this is the thing. People assume it's because kids have fidget toys. That's why they do all these things. And so they think you take it around. My whole body is a stimmed, like, again, it's our hair, it's our eyelashes. It's
I play with my hair so often. And again, the way that I stop myself from, that one's not an unhealthy one, honestly. Especially because I take very good care of my hair because I like the sensory experience of playing with my hair. That helps me stim. One of the ways I stop myself is by curling my hair because it no longer has the same experience when it's curled. It doesn't feel the same. It's not giving me that sensory experience that I need.
Find replacement behaviors. If you are doing an unhealthy stim, I would say there are replacement behaviors. There's things like jewelry, which is jewelry, things you can wear that you can chew on safely, like it's made from like food grade silicone, things like that. So I would say that's very helpful. Like if you're doing things that are harmful, but most of the time stims are fine. Like just let people move around and be themselves.
That's one of the things that I always correct. Don't do quiet hands. Quiet hands is fine if they're flapping their heat.
If you don't let us get that energy out, it may lead to a meltdown. A meltdown is often mistaken as a temper tantrum. Meltdowns are the body's way of reacting to a confusing or overstimulating situation. Meltdowns can be loud or they can be very quiet. Meltdowns are like this massive part of autism that are misunderstood.
Yeah. I think that it's also important to note that because I like to differentiate between the really loud meltdowns and the really quiet ones. I like to say meltdown versus shutdown, because those quiet meltdowns, even though they're resulting from the same thing that the loud meltdowns are doing, it's just a different response at times.
It's important that we talk about meltdowns, especially as autistic adults who have the ability to communicate on platforms like this, because for so long, meltdowns have been only talked about by observation. It's what they look like to the outside world. It's what they look like, say, to a parent of an autistic child or a family member looking at their autistic, family member and being like, oh my gosh, they're just like so out of control. And meltdowns are when we are so overstimulated. It can be from like lights and sounds and things like fireworks. But sometimes, Riki has talked about with me things like it could be a windy day.
Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah. And you couldn't handle it anymore.
Like I get overstimulated by the wind all the time. If it is windy outside, I'm inside.
Yeah. When I was younger, this looked like temper tantrums. Actually, it still does. But that is what the adults around me, so my parents and teachers and other folks thought that I was having temper tantrums. And that we now know are meltdowns. Folks just said Lindsey is super dramatic. She's hormonal. Like there's a lot of different things that, like, if somebody moved something, my poor mom would like clean my room because I would be a pack rat or move something, go take dirty cups downstairs, and I would come home, see that something had been moved or changed in my room and lose it. And because for me, meltdowns often come out as rage. And that's something that is hard to talk about, because when you are raging and crying, again, people don't see that as a meltdown, as that internally I am out of control and I can't stop this. It's seen as like, you're spoiled, you didn't get your way, you just like, you have anger issues or whatever. When I get to that point, and as an adult now, I can start to sense when things are coming. And so with therapists and stuff, like I've got some coping mechanisms. But for many years, like literally we were in couples counseling, my partner and I, talking to the therapist saying, well, Lindsey has these really weird panic attacks, really unusual panic attacks that don't respond to the normal panic attack, like soothing methods.
No, and especially because like the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown, and in some cases,
I don't know if I think tantrums exist, but anyway.
I do think tantrums exist, because the thing is that with a tantrum, once the child gets what they want, the tantrum will stop. Once the person gets what they want.
Or adult, let's be honest.
Or adult. Yeah, like tantrums are a manipulation tactic. Meltdowns are not.
No.
Once we get what we want, if we are already in the point of no return, there's no return.
Yeah.
Like you can take away the sensory stimulation that's overwhelming us.
Well, and what we want is often like the wind to not touch us. Like, okay, like that's there's no coercion there, guys.
And for me in particular, when the meltdown is being caused by communication errors and like rule changes, like I had this one fight with my roommate where a rule had changed and I didn't understand why the rule had changed. And I had told her before, because I know I also know when I'm about to have a meltdown. I've told her before, I was like, hey, if I say that I'm done with a conversation, I need to be done with that conversation. Like I'm done. Like don't engage further. Just stop.
Because we know it's going to escalate. And so when we say that, it's not to be like rude, like, oh, we can't handle the truth. No, it's going to escalate, and I'm going to lose control of my body, and some of that is my mouth, and I will say things I can't take back. And I might not really remember doing it and saying it the way other people around me will. Seriously, we have no control. Like
no control whatsoever.
And again, that's the hardest thing, is that like
they're abusive, honestly.
meltdowns may come with a lot of rage. Like, it's
Mhm.
my brain and my body. Like, there's just so much, like, I feel trapped. That's what starts to happen is I start
Yeah.
to feel trapped, which sometimes people with panic attacks say that too. But like, I get to a point where I will try to communicate with the people around
Mhm.
me and I'm losing that ability.
And
And so I'll say, get out, go, leave me alone, stop.
I
Like,
try that, but if it
those
gets
are
to
the
that
ways that
point.
I'm trying to protect you and myself because I'm feeling
Mhm.
like, oh no, it's coming. It's coming. Like, this crushing wave is coming and I'm not going to be able to control it. But
Yeah.
people that are like, what the heck do you mean? Like, what's going on with you? And
Yeah.
they want you to, and I'm like,
And
and
for me,
I lose it.
I don't know if this is everyone else's experience, but a lot of those things that I can't control that I say in the moment are always things that I don't actually mean. I don't actually feel that.
Yeah. And we really don't have control over it, but it's because in most cases, for
Mhm.
me, and I think for you, we need to be left alone. Like, we need to be
Mhm.
able to self-regulate, and we can't, like, we're feeling like
Mhm.
trapped by the walls, people around us, all of those things. We can't calm down. We can't regulate our bodies. And so,
My partner and I have a safe word when we know that I'm getting to that point. If one of us says pineapple, we stop.
same. So that is the tactic, yeah, that my partner and I have as well, is that we have a safe word, because that a lot of times we start to lose our communication abilities. That is very common with autistic people, not everyone,
Mhm.
but a lot. A lot of people, your brain just starts to shut those
No,
parts off.
because it's going into fight or flight mode. So it's going into like the bare minimums.
Regularly right now, like, try to keep breathing because we're struggling, kind of thing.
Exactly.
And so having a code word or even a simple phrase like, I need a time out, that is not offensive to people, not like, get out, which I had, again, previously, I thought I, like, this is me trying to communicate things, but realizing like, I don't have the ability to be like, I feel a meltdown coming. I am dysregulated. Like, I need you to leave the room, please. That's not happening. So me saying,
That's why pineapple works for me, because it's just
right,
it's a one word, because I can't
right,
say I'm dysregulated, I need to leave. I mean, like sometimes I can if I can feel it coming on beforehand. But if I get to the point where I'm not being able to functionally communicate, I can just
right.
pineapple and go.
Yeah. And so having some, again, a lot of these things, it's like you kind of need to self-accommodate, like, come up with something when you are not in the moment, when you are not in a meltdown, when you are
Exactly.
not in distress,
Don't try and
come
do it
up
in the
with,
middle. You won't be able
right,
to.
right. And so this is why, like, having a therapist is really helpful. This is why, like, having safe people who do care about you, whether that is a partner, a family member, a friend, and stuff, that you can, like, kind of plan this out with,
Mhm.
script. And so, yeah, like, this is a little
It's a
script for me,
scripting.
is
Yeah.
I need a timeout, I need a break, right? And that
Mhm.
is something that translates. So sometimes, that if it's like not my partner, like, other family members or other people will respect that, because that, even if they don't, then, like, guess what? Then my partner's gonna explain to them later or whatever. But I think I'm very lucky because I have a neurodivergent family who has listened to me now and is realizing all of these things, like, unpacking a lot, as being like the most openly late diagnosed person in my family has been very interesting. But yeah,
I
these are the kinds of
unfortunately
things.
was not blessed with a neurodivergent family like that.
A lot of people aren't. And so I know I'm very, very lucky. So that's why I said finding a safe person that you could, so that, and that might be a therapist for a lot of
And
people.
if you don't have that safe person, if you don't have somebody around that can communicate your needs for you to the people um who are crossing those boundaries and causing this overstimulation, it is perfectly okay for you to just leave.
Yep. What do
You
they call that?
have
The Irish goodbye?
the
Peace
Irish
out.
goodbye. Don't even say goodbye. Don't. I know it sounds, they're probably going to think you're rude. They probably will think you're rude.
You will, but I've done it.
You are doing what you have to function and survive. And when you are in that level of fight or flight, you are not responsible to take care of anybody else but yourself. And by taking care of yourself, you are taking care of other people, because if you are keeping yourself safe, you are keeping them safe from you. So it is so imperative that you hear me when I say you can leave. You can go. It is one of the portions where like an elopement actually helps me.
Absolutely. I feel exactly the same way. And I think if that makes you uncomfortable, I hope you do feel empowered that you can just leave situations. If you, for whatever reason, that might not be possible, I would suggest having something pre-written, a little scripted out on your phone, on a card that you carry on you, something that gives you the ability to communicate with other people really quickly, and you won't have to rely on your own words or actions at that moment. And so I know people who do that. They carry around a card, or they have a text message that is like on their phone. It's just like an auto. Like if they press a button, it sends that, or that pulls up.
Don't write it when you're still angry. Because for me, if I'm still in that angry space, I'm going to make my little card say goodbye off.
Now, again, all of these coping mechanisms, everything we've talked about, whether it is a code word, whether it is a script, whether it is, a card or a text message, whatever coping mechanism you decide, you need to plan those and prepare those when you are in a safe, calm place.
Something like, I'm in meltdown, I need to go. Like something simple like that. That's a communication.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, see, I'm glad we're talking about terminology, but also you can tell, like, Riki and I are also ADHD along with our autism. So we go off on some tangents, but I feel like these are such important things to talk about.
They are.
Speaking of that, when we say that we have both of these things, it's called a comorbidity. Having two chronic diseases or conditions in a patient. Many things are often comorbid with autism, including epilepsy and ADHD.
And another one, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Yes. There are a number of autoimmune conditions that have incredibly high rates of comorbidity in autistic people. We joke in the community that it's kind of like Pokemon. Like you can't just
gotta catch them all.
Gotta catch them all. So yeah, there's more studies that need to be done on this. Like with most things, they haven't studied women.
No.
They don't study things in women. And a lot of these conditions, as they've started to study them, or as we have anecdotally started taking data, as groups of autistic folks are able to engage with each other online and stuff, realizing that, oh, I have this too. So do you, so do you, so do you, so do you.
Twinsies.
Right. And so although the cited study for this one has been misquoted a lot, research is still trending towards a common comorbidity with autism is PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. In fact, a lot of neurodivergence in general. So if you are ADHD, autistic, bipolar, especially those three,
hey, that's me.
Right? Those three have a high comorbidity rate with PMDD, which is extreme emotional dysregulation, thoughts of harm to yourself and others. Is your hormones are just wild, and the pain.
Yeah, physical pain, like PMDD involves a lot of things like extreme period cramping to the point where you're like, oh my God, do I have like ovarian cysts or something?
Yeah.
But like it's extreme period cramping. It's also like things like diarrhea, like extreme, like it's bad. Autistic people in general, especially autistic women, are so often excluded in conversations about our own bodies. Women's bodies are bodies of people who are assigned female at birth. It's still very taboo to talk about our bodies because, God forbid, we talk about science and the human condition. But autistic women and people of other marginalized genders in particular are so often excluded from like the sex ed talk in high school, where we're just like, They don't need to learn it. We're going to push you guys out of the class while we talk about this. And so that leaves us,
guess what? Misinformation, like
that too.
even to this day. But also, if you grew up in the 90s, the 80s, beforehand, okay, all of the beforehand, you also probably didn't get a lot of information either, because as we keep finding out, they have not been researching women.
Our comorbidities are very common within the autism community. Very often we have more than one disorder. I myself have autism. I have ADHD. And as of 2016, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And having all three of those is like having a wrestling tag team that is constantly tagging each other in to mess up my life. And I never know which one of them on the carousel of comorbidities is gonna mess me up for the day.
Yeah, because a lot of times they fight against each other. It's like I say,
and
like,
sometimes
it's like
they fight
having
with
toddlers,
each other.
right? Like toddlers in my brain. And
when the toddler is gang up on you, you don't know what to do. You just succumb.
Yeah. So there's a lot of comorbidities with autism, y'all. Okay. We have referenced this before and we will do it again. The DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. The 5th edition of the reference manual published by the American Psychiatric Association, for which the text was revised in 2014 and in 2023, which is the TR that they end at the new books should say TR at the end. The DSM-5 appears to be the most widely used manual of diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorders in the United States.
What happened was that they gave more comprehensive examples that were inclusive of people who had previously been overlooked when studying autism, in particularly women and people of color. So you still have to meet the diagnostic criteria for autism. You still have to meet 3 out of 4 of those diagnostic points in order to be autistic. However, a lot of people were missed because they didn't fit the examples given in the studies done on little white boys. Now we have more examples of what it may look like.
Right. The wording just was slightly changed to be more inclusive so that, again, some of the examples they would give of behaviors you might see, etc., now are worded better, because for the longest time, it was very specifically based on the stereotype of a little white boy. And so if you were higher masking, if you come from a different cultural background, you were not included in the examples they gave, etc. And so now it is a little bit better. It's not perfect, but it means
it is still the
better.
Best diagnostic tool that we have in identifying autism. And like, it always irritates me because there are a lot of people within the autism community who say things like, well, the DSM is flawed, so we shouldn't use it. No, it's flawed and we should use it.
Right.
Just because it's flawed doesn't mean you throw the whole thing out the window. That's literally saying, well, they didn't include enough people in this beginning level study, so we should just throw the whole study out the window because it's wrong. And I'm like, okay, not necessarily. What you do is you use the building blocks of that study to go more in depth as we go along and develop more understanding as we go along.
The more we learn, the more research we have, the more information gets added, and that's what's important. But yeah, at the end of the day, you need to meet the criteria for autism in order to be autistic. And there was a kerfuffle. There was on TikTok, and I'm sure other places where people are like, they just throw it all out. Doesn't work like that. Diagnostic criteria is still the diagnostic criteria. Yeah. It just may look differently. A presentation is different. That is the difference. Okay. Identity first language. We use this a lot. Okay. Is referring to a person with a description of them in the context of their disability, such as autistic person. Many people see their autism as a part of who they are and identify proudly with it. Autism cannot be separated from the person. And so people may choose to use identity first language.
Again, this is one of those things where this is not a hard and fast rule within the autism community, and it shouldn't have to be.
It can change over time.
Yes, it can. And it also does not apply to all disorders. In particularly, I've heard this when I've been in community with people with Down syndrome. People with Down syndrome do not like identity first language. And what that comes from is a history of being dehumanized from having such a visible disability, and one that affects them to a different level than maybe somebody who is high masking like Lindsey or I. And so for them, using person first language, person with Down syndrome, was a way of reclaiming humanity. For autistic people, in particularly those who are more masked, autism tends to be more of an invisible disability. And for us, identity first language was an exception that this is who we are. This is part of who we are, is why identity first and person first never will be a hard and fast rule and should not be.
Right. I think the biggest thing with the community is that there has been recently in the last few years a shift towards identity first language by saying I'm autistic or I'm an ADHDer and things like that, especially like she said, for what is known as an invisible disability. So it's harder to tell what someone has going on because it's in their brain and maybe not be obvious the first time you look at them, is because for so many years, what trainings have said, and these were often done by people who are able-bodied, who were not disabled, and who were not a part of, let's say, the autistic community, made these choices and policies without our input. And so
the best intentions, but
right, great
involved.
intentions. They said, we should use person-first language, say person with a disability or person with autism, because we need to remind people that they are a person. And that, to a lot of us, was really upsetting because it was like, you have to remember that I'm a human being in order to treat me well? Like, what?
Which is that shouldn't be a thing. That shouldn't be a thing. Like, you shouldn't have to remember that I'm a person before you treat me like a person.
But it is something that was going on. And so because of that, for the last 20 years, that's been pushed so hard, there has been a shift in some communities with some people to use identity first language. I use identity first language. I use all kinds of language, let's be honest. But for me, saying I am a person with autism sounds like I have a purse of autism that I carry around. My purse of autism. Right. And that's not the case. I don't get to like set it down or put it away when it's inconvenient. Like, this is something I deal with on a daily basis. And it's really, truly the way my brain is wired. I mean, for so many years, again, because I was undiagnosed, I knew something was wrong. I knew I was struggling with things that other people didn't seem to be. And so when I actually had answers and labels of words for myself to explain things, they're really important to me.
They are. Again, this is something that can be different from person to person as well. As I mentioned before, I'm bipolar, along with being autistic and having ADHD. I don't feel the same about my bipolar disorder as I do with my autism. My autism, and this is just me and the way I experience this. If you do not experience these things the same way I do, that is completely valid. That is completely valid. But for me, autism is who I am. Bipolar is something that happens to me. It doesn't feel, because for me, it feels like autism is always there and always involved. But like, then my bipolar disorder will just come take control and then throw me back. So I don't prefer person first language with bipolar disorder, even though like I do occasionally, like I'm bipolar, but it doesn't feel like I'm saying the same thing as when I say I'm autistic. I'm autistic feels like this is everything about me. Bipolar feels like occasionally I have hormonal imbalances that will severely affect the way I communicate and engage in the world.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way about PMDD, where that is something that happens to me and my hormones occasionally, right? Versus, the ADHD and autism,
They're who you
here.
are.
They are
They're
here.
here to
They are
stay.
so ingrained in who I am. Right. I mean, it's a kind of a running joke in our community to be like, I'm just a bunch of autism and ADHD wrapped in a trench coat. Like, you sit there and you'd be like, I thought I was unique. Right. And it's like, no, I'm just a bunch of symptoms in a trench coat. Yeah. And again, it's one of those things where people are allowed to make that choice for themselves.
Mhm.
I think the biggest thing that we would advocate against is correcting somebody's
Yes.
terms for themselves, like especially for those of us who we are video creators, we're content creators, we're online, and we have every week have some person come in and say, you shouldn't be saying you're autistic, you should say person with autism. And that is not cool. Like, that's not okay.
And I also, whenever people are experiencing and working through how they identify, whether they identify with person first or identity first, I always encourage people to ask yourself where that comes from on either side. Do a little internal check-in. Okay, why do I want to identify with person first? Is this because of the way people have treated me? Is this because for me personally, autism does not feel like something that I am or that I'm integral to me? It just feels like something that happened to me, the same way I experience my bipolar. That's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. But it's a chance to figure out yourself a little better, how you interact as a disabled person. And it's also a chance for some people to check whether or not they're having some internalized ableism. Because for me personally, I did not like to identify as autistic. I liked to identify as person with autism for a long time because I was uncomfortable with the fact that I was autistic. I had a lot of internalized ableism to deal with.
You'd been shamed for it for so long that it took a long time for you to change, shift your mindset.
And
so
that's a lot of people.
With a lot of these terms, like we keep saying, is that they can shift over time. Okay. Things will change over time, but also between different people, there might be different preferences, and that's all okay. The last one we wanted to talk about, which actually goes along with other things we've talked about, is interoception, which is the perception of internal signals from the body, knowing when you feel hungry, full, hot, cold, or thirsty, and also knowing when to use the toilet. This is a really key component of the autistic experience. We've talked about it when we talked about our stimming and meltdowns and all of these things. These are all sensory experiences. And so interoception plays into that. Sensory experiences can be things like you are hypersensitive, meaning like there's too much, right? I can hear the refrigerator running.
God, why are they so loud?
A whole nother section of the house. Like, there's a lot of us who can hear electricity when other people's brains naturally tune it out. And we hear it all the time, and we hear it loudly, and we cannot focus on anything else because we're hearing what is supposed to be tiny, quiet, buzz humming, pitch issue. There's also hyposensitivity. People can be hypo, meaning they don't feel things as strongly and they crave it. So like I have friends who don't feel very much pain. They have less sensation, which then becomes problematic because they don't know when they've hurt themselves. Because for them, it takes a much higher level of sensory experiences. Like they've got to have been hit by something really hard in order for their body to register, this is pain. And this is one of those things that like people can have sensory issues for any number of reasons. I feel like I can't say this. It is the frequency and intensity of this stuff that makes it an autistic thing, okay? This is a frequent, intense issue.
One of the ways I think some of this is misinterpreted, so a lot of people don't think they struggle with interoception, especially like ones like remembering to go to the bathroom. A good example of a lack of interoception that is often misunderstood. If your bladder only goes from 0 to 100, that is a lack of interoception, because your body is supposed to send you signals before then that you have to go to the bathroom. It's not supposed to just wait until it's too late.
Right. Like you shouldn't be running to the bathroom like, oh no, I'm going to have an accident on such a frequent basis, like all the time. And that is very common for autistic people. I know within like my own like friends and family, that is so common that like we don't know we need to go to the bathroom until it is almost too late.
Or
And
sometimes it is too late.
It is too late. Yes. And so that is the common thing. It's hard to explain, again, to people who don't experience it, if they're just observing this, when your body doesn't tell you.
You can't help it.
Yeah. Like, I won't know until I feel like that pain, like my bladder. Except now I have this fun thing. So there's also some other, again, comorbidities. We learned that word. When it comes to interoception, there also, with toileting and some other issues, can be some comorbidities with other health conditions. And so I know autistic friends who have no control over their bladder and other the urinary tract, other body parts. Like that's just a comorbid thing with their autism. And so it makes it really difficult. I have IC, which is interstitial cystitis. And that means I feel like I have to go to the bathroom all the time. So there are some things I could do, like dietary wise and things. And like I drink a lot of water so that when my body keeps giving me these signals, I actually do have something to flush through. And that's something I had to like learn to do. And there's things like, spicy food. There's a whole list of different things. There's some treatment options. But if you've ever had a UTI before and you know that feeling of like you need to go urinate and it's really intense and it gets painful, that is something that I deal with. And I'm not alone. There are other autistic people that this is a comorbidity with.
Also, even without comorbidities, I know that this is particularly a struggle for autistic people socialized as girls, because there's a lot of fat phobia in the world, in the United States in particular. And so we are trained to suck in our stomachs at all times. And what this does is it actually weakens our pelvic floor, which is that part of our body that can actually like stop us from going to the bathroom like without meaning to. This is why a lot of women experience peeing a little bit when you laugh or when you sneeze or things like that, even before childbirth, because I know it's a big thing after childbirth because your pelvic floor is like gone at that point. And so it does lead to a lot of accidents. And there's a lot of shame around that. But I want to say here now, as an autistic adult, accidents are an inevitability. It's going to happen. It happened to me literally like a month and a half ago while I was at school. It was the most nightmarish experience of my life because I full on like peed my pants at school. Like, what am I, in my second grade? No, I'm an MFA student in an MFA program. And I just sat there.
I'm 30 years old and I just peed my pants at school.
And I peed my pants. And so I like sat there in the bathroom just like shaming myself so bad until I heard people outside the stall talking about periods. And I was like, hey, wait, I'm in black pants. I can just pretend that my period overflowed. Perfect. And I just happen to also have a spare pair of pants. But like, which is a recommendation I make for people. Yes. Bring a spare pair of pants.
I will say this. If you are listening as a parent of an autistic child, I hope some of this was helpful, but very much this interoception, this is something that I don't want to say like we all struggle with, but like most of us do. It's like overwhelming in some capacity, whether it's, the toileting issue, but also like, the not knowing when we're hungry or full until it's
that's
painful.
A big one too.
Again, it's these things where they're supposed to be, which it blows my mind every time. Because I'm like, I read this, I know it's a fact. There are supposed to be cues, bodily cues that are more subtle and gentle that let you know, hey, like, you should probably eat in an hour. you should probably go to the bathroom in 30 minutes. Okay. Like what? And I don't experience any of those. I only experience pain. And that's how I know it's time to eat, or, oh, I should stop eating, or, oh, I need to go to the bathroom. And so it's so bizarre for me to have these conversations like I'm an expert, like, oh, this is what's normal, because I've never experienced normal. I
Yeah, I
haven't.
just told the world that I peed my pants as a 30-year-old adult.
Right. And so, yeah, but I don't know, if you are a parent and you're listening, like, kudos to you. Thank you for trying to learn about autism from those of us who've experienced it. Like, I just appreciate that.
If you're not autistic and not even a parent of an autistic child, thank you for listening and trying to understand better. Even though these conversations are kind of really embarrassing to have, I think they're still important, because I think so many of us are trapped in that shame where we think that we're the bad one. We're the one who doesn't work. We're the one that has all of these bad things that happen, and we internalize it like it's somehow a personal failing on our part. But no, this is happening to other people. We're just too scared to talk about it. So
You are not alone.
You are not.
And these are all like neutral things that just happen and are part of the autistic experience. And so, yeah, that's why we think it's so important to have these conversations, and for us to have a podcast like this where we will continue to talk about our experiences and things that are uncomfortable or, debatable. All of those type of things, I think it's really important for us to have. And that's why we will be continuing to ask autistics. We will be asking autistics these kinds of questions to keep this conversation going. Thank you so much for listening, especially to the long rambles.
So long rambles.
You did learn some terminology somewhere in there.
And if you didn't, you still got to sit with two very hot girls. So it's still a net positive for you.
Thank you for listening. Again, I am Lindsey Brains and Spoons.
I am Rebecca Riki Rivera Bonbon.
And you can find Asking Autistics on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the places. You can find us both with our screen names on all the places. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit any buttons that might be around. Thanks.
All the buttons. Hit them all.
Okay.